Welcome to Wish Hut Chats. Come on in and sit for our spell. We're sponsored by Evermoving We Rise Institute, LLC, Evermoving We Rise Temple, and Saul Ravencraft, the Texas Mojo Man. I am your guys' host, Miss Flame, and our co-host, Saul Ravencraft, is somewhere around here. Where have you been?
Here I am. I've been all over the place. There's been so many things, so much going on. No rest for the wicked, I suppose. How are you today, Miss Flame?
Are you wicked today?
Well, I mean, it depends on who you talk to, right? I don't conform with society's norms, and for some that makes me wicked. Why give people get out of hell free cards?
Well, I mean, you are a chaos magician. So what you been up to? So,
Well, I just finished an event this last weekend, teamed up with someone who had a booth at I guess it was kind of a sci-fi / horror / fantasy convention in Temple, Texas, breathing some life into a mall. And I was in the back of the booth doing readings. So there was a lot of that. And, you know, when you do readings at events like that, it is a lot. So there was that. And a lot of what I'm dealing with right now is trying to get this show produced that's coming up in June, and trying to make that happen. It's a lot. I can give you a glimpse of it here. It's Saul Ravencraft's damn show. And it's going to be at the Nature's Treasures Event Center for people in Texas. And it's the way I like to think about it is it's a part late night talk show, part Pee-wee's Playhouse of the Damned. And we've got some variety in there, but you know, as you know, when you're doing something that involves more than one person, that adds an extra layer of complication there, because they're not thinking about it every day, all day like you are, and don't have as much of their energy put into it as you do, and they won't stay up till 3 in.the morning because something needs to be done, or you know, work on 3 hours of sleep because something else needs to be done. Right. But there's a lot that goes into this, because it is more of a theatrical production than things that I typically do. So outside of a lot of the writing and design and art and that kind of thing, there's also production design and promotional things. And do you know more than you want to now?
I want to know, is there flying monkeys?
There are, but not in this dimension.
There's not flying monkeys in the show?
No, there are not. Not yet, anyway. Never say never. Never say never.
So, who is knocking at the door?
Well, I did hear a knock. Let us see. Well, look, it is Witch, award-winning author, tarot advisor, and influencer, Courtney Weber.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be with you all.
Glad you could make time with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it is time for our divination. Is everybody ready for this?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
And do you want to explain to people that maybe this is their first time exactly why we do these divinations? Ms. Flame?
Well, we started these divinations because of me drinking tea. And I was drinking the Positive Energy Tea by Yogi, or is it Yoga, or it was something. Anyway, and they would come with these little teeny tiny sayings. And so we decided to make the sayings part of the show. And they started to repeat on us. And well, you can't say the same saying on the show all the time. So afterwards, we started looking for other sayings. And now, here's a new saying. So, Mr. Saul.
So here is our divination for today. Life is like a 10-speed bicycle. Most of us have gears we never use. And that's Charles M. Schulz, the creator and artist for the Peanuts cartoon.
Okay, now, Saul, you may have to explain what a 10-speed bicycle is, because some kids may not know what that is.
I think they can look it up. They can ask AI to draw them a 10-speed bicycle. Did you ever have a 10-speed bicycle? I did for a while.
I did.
I also did, but I'll be honest, I think Charles was right. I didn't use a lot of the gears.
Right.
You know.
Right. And actually, I got rid of my geared bicycle and I replaced it with just a good old-fashioned, simple, one-speed bicycle. And it works just fine.
So, Mr. Saul, since you came up with the saying, what does that mean in life?
Well,
How can you apply it?
I think Courtney was in the right direction right up front. That we don't always use everything we have for various reasons. I think a lot of things that are part of our power, part of our being, we set aside because responsible adults don't do that sort of thing, or people shamed us about things that we loved, and so we tucked those off into the shadows and sometimes never dare to bring them out again. And it may be that you don't need to use all the gears. Some of them were designed for going up steep hills and that sort of thing, and make it possible so that your muscles were more efficiently transferred to the bike's motion. You didn't go fast, but you went, right? But I do wonder, someone who does know how to use all 10 gears, do they ride the bicycle better? Do they travel more efficiently or more effectively? It really depends. Where were you going with that, Courtney?
Well, I think you don't, it's kind of like you said, you don't always need all the gears. You don't always know what kinds of strengths you have until they're tested. And I bring up the story from an old friend of mine. And he self-describes himself as a good old-fashioned nerd. He's a pretty lean guy. He loves books. And just was never really interested in being, a dude bro kind of guy. He really liked the fact that he was kind of more of a studious, nice dude, as he described himself. And he tells me the story about once he was at a party with his girlfriend at the time, and somebody pulled a gun. And he said something came over him, And he picked up his girlfriend, slung her over his shoulder, and ran out of the house.
Wow.
And he would have never, he self-described himself as a hero in that moment. And that he also said he didn't realize that that was in him. I think that maybe I'm putting this on him, that he might have been the kind of person who assumed he might have hidden or tried to talk the guy out of holding the weapon. But instead, there was that part of him that is pick up his, the woman he loves and race her to safety. And was kind of confused by that. Like, I didn't know that that was something I had. And it was something that he and I discussed. It's like, yeah, but how many times were you in a situation where someone pulled a gun? And he's like, well, never. That's the first time. So then, so it's, excuse me, it's like what you were saying about going up a certain hill and switching into a gear. If you're not using that hill, you don't need that gear. He wasn't someone who was in a situation where there were a lot of weapons. And then the one time that he did encounter a weapon, that's what his gears did. And I've experienced that myself, as someone who presents as female moving through the world. And there have been times I tell people I unleash my inner pit bull if, a man is coming for me or coming for a woman that I'm walking around with. And I have a very scary voice when I'm in those situations that I don't really use hardly ever. But when I'm going up that certain hill, I switch into that gear, if that makes sense.
All right. How about you, Nikki?
All right. Well, the thing about it is, it reminds me about when they talk about like movies like Unlimited List. What if we knew, if we got to be able to use all of our brain instead of just a percentage of it? What could we do? Just imagine that. Open up to unlimited possibilities. I was always really curious about that kind of thing. Way back in, I think it was either the late 80s or the early 90s, they had this theory about some people only use their left brain or their right brain. By the way, that's bullshit. That is complete 100% bullshit. Because the brain actually uses both sides, no matter what side that you're using, whether you're creative or whether you are logical. It has to use both sides in order to do anything. And that's a scientific fact, by the way. When it comes to gears, let's go back to the metaphor. When it comes to gears, I think being able to have an open mind and to explore every single thing that you have is a really good thing. That way you know exactly who you are and who you can become. And it brings out the authentic self in you. It also shows how you can be able to be a better person and what spirit has in store for you. I do agree with Courtney about there's sometimes as women, we have to do certain things in order to protect ourselves because we are more likely to be a victim than men are. And we have to do certain things in different ways than men to be able to protect ourselves. And we have to say certain things in order to protect ourselves. I mean, for example, our voices may have to be higher. There's certain languages that we may have to use, or we may have to run, or we may have to do other things because of the way that we are. But when it comes to exploring those gears, I don't think that we should stop and not consider exploring them just because they are, how can I put it? Not by society standards. or because we're afraid of
Right.
exploring them. As witches and magical people, we are the ones that push the boundary. And we are the ones that uncover what is unknown. And I think we need to keep our minds open to that.
Right. Well, I really like Courtney's point about not being tested, that we don't know what we're capable of until we tap into that. And the 10-speed bike, that's a lot of gears, right? And it's just a wonderful reminder that we generally don't know what we're capable of. And something that I'll say to people in readings is don't let people tell you what you can't do. Go find out.
Right.
And if you haven't tested something, you really have no idea what its limits are, what your limits are.
Right. Especially when it comes to scenarios. When people ask you, what will you do in scenarios? You can theorize it. I know being in college, they always ask us about theories and they tell us about theories and stuff. But when you get into the actual world and you try to apply a theory, the theory goes out the door.
Right.
It really goes out the door. And you're there and you're trying to do the actual, what Byron and I call field magic. You're just doing it. You're picking up everything you possibly can, and you're trying to put everything together to make things work. Screw the theory. All right. So Courtney, you have a new book coming out, correct?
I do. It's came out last year. I've got a copy of it here for y'all to see. I'm looking at this in the mirror, so it's a little strange. But yeah, I had a book out last year called Sacred Tears, A Witch's Guide to Grief. For all of witchcraft's strengths and its freedoms, one of the things it was missing was a guide for how to navigate loss. And that is one thing that mainstream religions do offer. And while the benefits for many of us of leaving the constructs, if you will, about mainstream religions can really outweigh the downsides, religion has always been meant to help people cope with the experience of being human. And that includes methods and processes for grief. And when I had a serious loss, about 3 years ago, I was feeling, I wanted to read something about grief, but everything I read was kind of more of this, either God has a plan, which a lot of very excellent and well-meaning Christian writers were the ones saying that. And that wasn't something I was ready to hear. When you have a really extreme loss, you don't want to hear that it was any divine plan, because that just seems absolutely cruel. And then I also read a lot of things from also wonderful writers and well-meaning from Buddhists who basically said there is no plan and God doesn't have a plan, which is also something very difficult to hear as a spiritual person, as in, then what's the point of all this work I'm doing if this is either the gods have a plan to put me through this absolutely horrific thing, or the gods have no plan at all, and I've just been spending all this time honoring them for what? So I set out on my own exploration of what it looks like to be a witch that's in grief, and the experiences and processes of that spiritually, and what that can mean for people who identify as witches.
Yeah, it's just like with me, I have been grieving for a long, long time. And I've just been pushing that back and pushing it back and pushing it back and pushing it back. And then Belladonna actually recommended for me to talk to the mentor. And she pulled it out of me. And it's a really, really strong feeling. Once it's pulled out of you, I mean, it's like unleashing the Niagara Falls out of you. It is something that's really hard, but it really needs to be addressed because grief is something that it's not only faced when it comes to a death. I mean, I lost Daisy. People who have the show know who Daisy is. Daisy was my dachshund who I lost back in October. And she was my best friend. She was everything to me. And I have pushed that grief and pushed that grief. And I mean, I even wear her around my neck right here. And I still miss her. I still wake up in the middle of the night waiting to take her out every night. And it's still heartbreaking every time I wake up and I go to pet her and she's not there. So we do need some type of way to be able to deal with grief. And with that, we will be right back with Witch Hat Chats. And stay tuned. We are all magical beings. As a solitary practitioner, you forge your own path, growing, evolving, and discovering your power. But the solitary road can be difficult, filled with challenges, setbacks, and self-doubt. What do you do when things bump back? At Evermoving We Rise Temple, our name is our way of life. We understand that spirituality is deeply personal, yet the journey is easier with guidance, support, and community. Here, you'll not only learn to wield the magical tools at your fingertips, but also develop the personal responsibility and confidence to own your magic. In our safe and welcoming space, you'll gain the reinforcement you need to master your craft, surrounded by a magical family that stands strong together. Step beyond the solitary struggle and step into a thriving community dedicated to your magical evolution. Start today. Visit our website, Linktree, or Facebook page. Discover why we don't fit in the box. And coming soon, the Evermoving We Rise Institute, your next step in mastering your spiritual path and deepening your magical practice. The journey doesn't stop here. Are you ready to rise?
I'm Saul Ravencraft, co-host of Witch Hat Chats. I understand just how confusing and chaotic it can be to open to a path of magic and manifestation. Everything seems to turn on its head. I want to be an ally as you find the way upon your path. My studio setup will let us do readings, coaching, and exploration virtually, just as though you were sitting across the table from me. One size does not fit all.
and we will work together to craft the right approaches to build your practice, your confidence, and your power using the tools of divination, magical works, and spirit connections. It's never too late to embrace a new path and emerge empowered. Go to texasmojoman.com and select Contact to begin. There's a message now. Let's get started working on your very good fortune.
And welcome back to Witch Hat Chats. I am Saul Ravencraft. I am here with Miss Flame, and of course, we still have with us Courtney Weber, the witch about which we are speaking, and we've been talking about grief and the witch's path in grief. And so, Courtney, you said you wrote this book as a result of your own experience. Was the process of writing the book what got you to the other side of that? Or did you do the journey and at the end of it you went, I need to do something with this?
Honestly, it was both. So I lost a pregnancy at 12 weeks in. It was actually the same week as my Hecate book came out. So it was just a very intense time because I'm getting all this praise and these accolades where people are like, oh, your book is helping me find her. And I'm at this point where I'm, seriously questioning whether I even believe in anything that I've, had lived through up until this point. And so that happened in August. And come that Christmas, my husband and I went to visit my mother-in-law in Ohio, and she has this beautiful finished basement. And this was kind of as we were starting to come out of COVID. So, my husband hadn't seen a lot of his friends and family in that area for a while. So he would go out and connect with the people he hadn't seen because of the pandemic. And I was very content to sit in that beautiful basement and just write. Basically, I started by writing everything, the things I wanted to have told myself from 6 months before. And being a writer and how, it's kind of like, if I'm going to start this, it's going to end up going somewhere. With my Cancer Sun and Libra rising, I desperately want this to be useful to others. And so I was it started by trying to, cross timelines and help myself from 6 months earlier. And then it broadened to tools that I can offer others. And I really liken this, and for my neurodivergent friends, I just want to give you the heads up. I'm about to speak in a lot of metaphors, so let's just roll along. But hiking is a wonderful thing. Going out into the wilderness alone is a wonderful thing. There are people that are hardcore, wilderness explorers that will just go out into very rugged terrain for months, and they have incredible experiences. That's not me. I'm much more of a hike 3 miles in, take the picture at the waterfall, and then have lunch and hike 3 miles out. That's me. But there are people that do things that are far more intense, and I admire them so much. And one of the things that they do is they bring supplies with them. They bring food, and they bring a first aid kit, and they probably bring also battery powered radio, things where they can get assistance from the community that they left behind. They went out into the woods perhaps because they need space from that community. They don't want to be in the city. They need to get further away, just for whatever that is. But if they get injured, then they have the tools to help themselves get back to, or get to other resources that can help them get back on their feet and continue to live. And in a metaphoric sense, the witch's journey is very much like that. It is largely a solo journey, even when people have traditions and covens and things. It still is largely a very solo, subjective journey. And we're really kind of going out into the spiritual wilderness alone in a lot of ways. And we need to bring some tools with us to navigate things like grief, which is kind of like if a hiker falls and breaks their leg in the woods, they need help. If a witch is out in their spiritual wilderness and they experience a loss, they need help. And so this book was never meant to then create like a tradition of grief for witches. It's meant to be more like a spiritual first aid kit or a spiritual bag of elixirs. And not every tool in here is going to be appropriate for every spiritual injury, much in the way that not everything in a first aid kit is going to be necessary for every kind of injury. But hopefully there's something in there that will help the witch get back on their feet emotionally, spiritually, personally, until they can get to the next bag of elixirs, first aid, spiritual first aid kit, what have you, so they can continue their healing and maybe even get to a point of strength where they can create their own elixirs, create their own first aid kit to help them get back on their feet enough to complete their journey. That's what this book is for. My biggest fear with this book, and so far only one time has it come to pass, is that somebody's going to look at this book and think it's going to save them. And no one book can save you. No one book on grief can save you. But my hope is that every single person, regardless of their spiritual beliefs or traditions, will find something in here that will help them during their time of grief. In fact, recently I was speaking at Moonstone, Minneapolis, and lovely, lovely store in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and talking about sacred tears and talking about grief. And there was a woman there who was an atheist, but she was grieving. And I saw a lot of myself in her, because when I was grieving, I was looking for spiritual tools outside of my tradition. And so she was looking for something outside of her tradition of an atheist path. And I told her, there are things in this book that will be helpful to you, connecting with your own lived experience as a spirit, or whatever you define as spirituality, whether or not you believe in a higher power or believe in anything outside of ourselves. There's things in here that can help you get further along on your journey. And that's what I wanted this to be for. So I look at one of the things a couple of the things I offer in here, which I think are particularly helpful to really any grieving person, but witches in particular, is the fact of exploring the concept of closure as a myth. A myth is not, we make mistakes when we think that a myth is a true story. But we also make mistakes if we say that there is no truth to a myth, that myths do contain truth. And closure is not an objective thing. It's not something that exists out there. We have to find it. It is something we create, much as the myth is not a story that has to be proven to be true. It is a story that was created at one time, but it does contain truth, just as our own stories about our own closure contain a truth. And so I offer some exercises in there for people to explore their own stories with closure and their own stories as loss as myths. And that doesn't mean that it's dismissive. It means that it's beautiful. Your story is beautiful, and there's going to be mystery around it. There are going to be some reasons why you will never really understand why something happened. Like, I never got a medical explanation for why my loss happened. And I have chosen to accept a spiritual story around that I keep to myself, but I will never have a way of verifying that. And it would be harmful to me and really unnecessary for me to try to prove that story I've chosen around why this happened, that I need to prove that it's true. I do not need to prove that it's true. And I also can accept that I don't have any reason to know it is true, but I have chosen that this is the closure, this is the story about why my loss happened, and that offers me peace. But I have to create that within myself. I cannot find it outside of myself. And that's where people harm themselves, not in looking for closure, but looking for someone else to validate their closure, to validate that story, to tell them that story is true. That's where we get hurt. Right? We give ourselves peace when we say, this is the story I've chosen to accept. I have no way of verifying if it's true or not, and I'm not interested in doing so. But this is the story around what happened, why it happened, and it gives me peace. No. The other thing that I talk about is grief being a spiral. Miss Flame, you talked about how in your journey of grief, you push back a lot. And honestly, one of the things I do when I'm grieving is I'm a workaholic. I just start working. Like right after my loss, I went to a fiction writing conference and started pitching my novel. And I nailed it. When I was pitching it. Unfortunately, no one picked it up, but my pitch sessions were phenomenal because that's where I could channel all of my energy. But I think most people agree that the stages of grief are not real.
Right.
Yet, I think that there's still part of us that wonders why we still haven't gone through all those, or why we keep going back to them, because grief isn't a checklist. Even Dr. Kubler-Ross, who coined those stages, she didn't believe they were supposed to be a catch-all for all kinds of grief. But if you can imagine grief being more like a spiral, and those experiences that we're most familiar with through the quote unquote stages of grief exist on that spiral, then we're not as troubled by it if we experience those things more than once. Like, you can experience anger at the beginning of your breakup, and then you're going to move on for a time, and you probably don't have as much anger as time goes by, and then one day you're out driving to the gas station, whatever, and a song comes on your playlist that reminds you of the breakup and the thing you never got to say, and you're mad again. And then you call your friend and they say, why aren't you over this? Let it go. And then you feel bad, and then you get even more angry. Instead of recognizing that, you know what? I just hit some anger again, and that is normal. What I choose to do with it is its own kind of journey. There may be some information for me in here about a place that needs to be healed. It could be a, reminder of, hey, let's not let this happen to us again. Let's try to avoid these kinds of situations. But it's not a problem for ourselves that all of a sudden we're out moving along and we find ourselves angry again, right? It's just the risk is that then we stay in that anger, that we choose to stay in that anger because we feel righteous about it, even if no matter how deserved the anger is, us staying within it does not help us. It does not punish the other person. Or there may be times that you go through life. Like I had a terrible heartbreak about 15 years ago, and, was married for 9 years. And there'd be times during my marriage that I would feel sad about the breakup, not because I wanted to be with that person, but because the circumstances, I would start to think about them and go, that was so awful, and I really wish that wouldn't happen. Then I would feel sad. Now, someone from the outside might be like, oh, she's still pining and holding a torch for it. And I'm like, no, I don't want to be with this person. I don't want to talk to this person. Even if I weren't married, I would not be exploring this. But there are moments that I might feel sad that things went the way they did. Maybe not sad over the breakup, but sad that this person's not my life anymore, sad that other people were hurt as part of this process. Like but when I started to realize that grief is a spiral and not just, things you have to experience and then they go away, that gave me so much peace as a witch, where I could just look at this and say, I'm hitting the sadness stage again, and I'm hitting, or the depression stage again over this sad thing that happened to me 12 years ago, but I'm stepping in it today for whatever reason I'm feeling it. Okay, well, that's a thing. And I can choose to either sit with it and explore it, ask this feeling, why are you here? What are you trying to teach me? And what do we need to do to attend to this? Or I can just look at it and kind of shrug and go, being human is so strange and wonderful, but also very strange. And then just continue about my business. And I've done that in a number of different ways. But the idea of the spiral is so beautiful and deep and powerful to so many witches that I wanted to offer the practice of seeing grief as a spiral, as a tool, as one of those elixirs, as one of those pieces of the first aid kit, so that when witches are out and about, and then they experience the grief over something, whether it happened last week or in the last decade, or even when they were little babies, that suddenly they're feeling sad about, the kitten that they lost when they were 5. And suddenly that feeling is that sadness is there again. It's an opportunity to go to understand the self better. And it's an opportunity to recognize being human and not to shame ourselves for quote unquote going backward, not letting go. That's not what it's about. It's about, yeah, I'm going to periodically navigate this. So
I think one of the things that people get confused about when it comes to loss is this idea that you're going to get over it. And I don't think we ever really get over loss. We grow accustomed to it.
yeah.
We
No,
deal with the
actually,
confusion of the loss, and then we understand the nature of the loss, but it's never undone. It's never back to normal, because that aspect, that person, that community, whatever it is isn't coming back.
And I had this conversation with a very dear friend of mine who he and his wife experienced the loss of 3 children at birth. Really devastating journey for him and his wife. And they actually just had a little boy, healthy and chunky and delightful. But those early weeks of having this beautiful child with them were just marred with absolute fear. Any things that would have made any parent a little concerned about, like, oh, is the weight gain appropriate? Oh, is he passing his milestones appropriately? Things that any parent would be concerned about were absolutely, alarm bells going off in my friend's life. And he wrote to me about it. And I said, I would like, because I did have my own little girl about 2 years ago. And live with this paralyzing fear that something will go wrong, or that, I'll miss something. And I know that is universal to all parents. And I think that there is a kind of intensity that comes when you've already lost a child, that fear. And I had said to my friend, I would like to say that you don't have that fear. I would like to say that fear goes away, but I don't think it does. But I do think that you learn to live with it and you don't let it control you as it once did. And that's what I think is I don't think we get over grief. I do think that the grief of our losses, it does change us. Margot Adler was said to have said, when you lose, your heart grows bigger to encompass the loss. And I do think there is a point when the grief doesn't control us anymore. And that is a powerful thing. Toward the end of my book, I say, you're not going to get over it. And like, oh no, that's terrible news. I say, well, you're also not going to sprout wings and fly. You're not going to grow gills and be able to breathe underwater. So you don't need to put pressure on yourself to, why haven't I sprouted wings yet? Why haven't I grown gills yet? Why can't I fly? Why can't I breathe underwater? Because that's not going to happen. However, you can still function as a land roaming mammal just fine. Same thing as you can function as a person who has experienced loss and a person who lives with a certain amount of grief just fine, because that no longer controls you. It does become part of your heart, your spiritual ecosystem. It offers gifts for deeper compassion, different kinds of appreciation. I don't ever want people to think that you have to lose in order to appreciate. I do think there is an opportunity to find certain kinds of appreciation on the other side of loss. It's not automatic, and people who don't lose can also find that appreciation. It's not an if and, but that's what I wanted to do with Sacred Tears. Is I wanted us to have some tools to use while we're out in the spiritual wilderness, and not if but when we get injured spiritually through our loss.
well, I tell people that you don't get over it, you get through it.
Mm-hmm.
Very much a different story, because you have to go through that process. And a lot of times that process can return, and people grieve differently. Not everybody grieves the same way. And it's okay, because we're all human. So tell our viewers where they can find you.
So I am all over the internet. My website is CourtneyAWeber.com. That is Weber with one B, not two. I'm on Instagram and TikTok a lot, so I offer a lot of witchcraft and tarot content there. And I have a virtual learning platform for people who wanting to live a magical life. In a deep way, but are not looking to join a specific tradition, but you would like the magical tools to help you navigate this experience of being a witch in the world. And so that's called the Cauldron Calling, and you can find that through Patreon. If you put my name in, that will turn up. This summer, I'm going to be in the South. I'm going to be speaking at Mystic South in Atlanta in July. I'm so excited. It's actually my birthday that weekend, so I'm hoping everybody turns out, but so we can have a really good time together there. And I'm trying to line up some speaking gigs in the Southeast, so I'll have more information about that soon. I will be speaking in Memphis at the Broom Closet on Tuesday, July 15th. So I'll be talking about Hecate and magic and signing books, and I'm really looking forward to it. From everything I've seen, it just seems like such a lovely community down there, and I can't wait to get to know some more folks there. So, folks, if you're listening and you're in Georgia, the Carolinas, or Tennessee, and you'd like me to come by your store, talk to your group, just hit me up and let's set something up.
Well, thank you for being on the show. We truly have enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This has been a real pleasure.
All right, so that's all for our show today. So embrace your power, support your community, and keep your fuzzy babies, your family, your friends, and yourself safe, and have an absolute magical week.